Today we're gonna do a video together. Last time we did this, it was the most underrated JRPG on every console, and I had a blast. I know probably most of you had a blast. So the video that we're gonna do today is called the best JRPG story on every console, as in which JRPG of every single console has the best story, the best plot ever written. And let's begin with the NES. I picked Dragon Warrior 4. Why Dragon Warrior 4? Because I think 3 and 4 are the ones that slowly started to get more into storytelling than before. I was like, man, okay, so this is a different level of storytelling. For games that are from the late 80s and early 90s, these I think they were kind of revolutionary. They show the world, they have the power to create good written stories with character development, stuff like that. But I think it was like that particular era, late 80s, early 90s, when developers said, you know, we can tell a good story in a video game. And a well-developed story, not just a generic story, you know, no, a well-written story, a long story for video games. And to me, Dragon Warrior 4 was the epitome of that, okay? And with different arcs until they come together, you know, it was pretty interesting. That was one of the first initial ideas of telling a story like that in an RPG, so I found it pretty interesting. So that's my pick. What do you guys think? Someone says Star Tropics. I don't feel Star Tropics is an RPG, but it does have some RPG elements, so okay, maybe. Crystal, this is another one of those games that doesn't focus too much on its story, but I never beat it, so I can't talk much about it. But Crystal had a very interesting premise, you know, the classic science fiction world in a kind of like a medieval setting, you know. It was pretty interesting, and it's kind of dark too. For the Super Nintendo, my pick is kind of like another one of the big ones too. Is Final Fantasy VI. Well, it was Final Fantasy III for North America, but in reality it was a true Final Fantasy VI. I think it has an amazing story, but I don't know, it's just the storytelling in Final Fantasy VI was like on a different level, you know. It was deeper, it was darker, it was more depressing. I mean, no spoilers, but when you get to that part with Kefka and what happens after that in the world, and the little arc that Celes goes through, that really hit me, man. That was like, man, I mean, and the music, I mean, Nobuo Uematsu, he nailed it with the music for some of the scenes, especially that Celes scene, which is Celes's theme. I don't know, I mean, it was a fantastic story. I know a lot of you have problems with the story because there's not one true main character. I mean, Terra was advertised as the main character, but when you play the game and you finish the game, you're like, Terra isn't the main character. Everyone is the main character. I mean, there's no real protagonist in this game. It's a game with multiple protagonists, but that's also the magic of it. What about you guys? Someone said Lufia 2. Totally agree. That was my second pick. I think it's a fantastic story and much better than the original. So obviously a lot of people are saying Chrono Trigger. A fantastic story, undeniable. Well, we can count Terra Enigma because there's an official English release of it. And I think the story, I never beat the game, so I can't talk much about it. But yeah, from what I've seen, I think it had the best story out of the Quintet trilogy. Super Mario RPG and Earthbound are kind of like cheesy, funny stories for kids. It's hard to take them seriously. But as stories for kids, you know, they are very well written. Super Mario RPG, I think the story is great. Alright, moving on to the Nintendo 64. Well, yeah, I'm picking Ogre Battle, because there's only like 4 JRPGs released outside of Japan. I mean, Ogre Battle, right? Can we all agree Ogre Battle has the best story? I know most of you haven't played that game, but it's one of those games, I mean, from the Ogre series, you know, from not the same writer. Matsuno had quit the company when they released this game. But yeah, I mean, the same people who work on Tactics Ogre and the first Ogre Battle, I mean, yeah. And this Ogre Battle, this one in particular, focuses more on its storytelling than the one on the Super Nintendo, March of the Black Queen. This one, subtitled as Person of Lordly Caliber, it had more story and character development, so I don't know. I mean, it's just, there's no doubt about it. I mean, Ogre Battle wins by a landslide. Ogre Battle 64. So that's it. Let's move on to the GameCube. I'm pretty sure some of you will think that my pick is Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, but no. Baten Kaitos beats it. For a little bit. I still think Path of Radiance has one of the best stories in the entire Fire Emblem universe. But Baten Kaitos is Baten Kaitos, man. The story was such an amazingly written story, and Masato Kato, he wrote the story. He is the writer of Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. He wrote Baten Kaitos, and you can tell it shows. And that plot twist, man. However, Baten Kaitos Origins, the sequel, I think it had darker, more interesting story, but the original Baten Kaitos had more characters, therefore more development, and that plot twist. I mean, it's just that plot twist. No spoilers, don't worry, but that freaking plot twist. I mean, I don't know. It was an amazing story. Tales of Symphonia. Someone saying it's a good story, but in my opinion, it's kind of on the cliche on the cliche side of things. Skies of Arcadia could work, yeah, even though it's a Dreamcast game, but I never finished it, so I can't comment much on it. For the Wii, I think I'm gonna go with Xenoblade Chronicles. Okay, I was gonna pick the last story, because it also has this amazing plot twist at the end that you weren't expecting, like what the hell. Amazing story, but I picked Xenoblade Chronicles because the lore, because it also has a plot twist near the end, because you play this game and you're like, how is this connected to Xenogears and Xenosaga, and you know nothing until the very end, when they finally reveal what's going on, the origin of the world, the purpose of those two giant things where people live in. You know, when they reveal that, it's like, holy shit, man. And it's also a story that, while it does have a little bit of the power of friendship and ancient evil cliches and all that stuff, it's also a very compelling story with some mature themes in there, and I felt that a lot of the cliches were kept to a minimum, and the development some of these characters go through, and the Fiora arc, no spoilers, but I don't know, I thought it was pretty cool and pretty interesting. So that's my pick, Xenoblade Chronicles. No spoilers, but I think I didn't beat it on the Wii, I beat it on the Switch, but I mean, it's the same, right? The story is the same, so my pick for the Wii is Xenoblade Chronicles. So what about you guys? Okay, so somebody said the last story in Fire Emblem. A Union Gamer says Arc Rise Fantasia. I think it has a phenomenal story. It's a really interesting story. It also has a bunch of plot twists that you weren't expecting, that something happens and you're like, no, this didn't happen. And several hours later, you're like it hits you. It finally hits you and you say, oh, it did happen, holy shit. Moving on to the Wii U. Wii U has like 4 JRPGs, I think, maybe 5. So even though I have barely played this game, I'm gonna pick Xenoblade Chronicles X, because it's from the Xenoblade universe. It's a Tetsuya Takahashi game, and I'm pretty sure it has an amazing story. Let's leave it at that. For the Switch, no, I did not pick Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Close tie. My pick is Triangle Strategy. I think it has a fantastic story, mature story, and I've said this many times before, I do enjoy some power of friendship and some slice of life dialogue every now and then, but I feel like I kinda needed a game with barely any of that focused 95% on its mature storytelling, with its adult situations, stuff like that, and Triangle Strategy has that. It focused a lot on that, and it just went overboard with more realistic dialogue, more realistic situations, and I don't know, it impressed me, man. The writers in this game, holy shit, they have my utmost respect for trying something like this, releasing it, and succeeding at it. The structure of the missions connected to the story, and were also amazing. How some of the gameplay mechanics and the map design had a lot to do with the story itself, with the plot. That game's story is a masterpiece. Alright, so somebody's saying Octopath Traveler. Couldn't agree more, man. That's a fantastic story. If I were to make a top 10 best stories on the Switch, Octopath will definitely be there. Persona 5, well, it is on Switch. It's hard for me to think of that game as a Switch game, because it was originally released on PS4 in 2017. It took many years for it to reach the Switch. But it's on Switch, it's there, we can't deny it, and Persona 5 is a great story. Shin Megami Tensei 5, definitely, but some people think SMT5 is one of the weakest in the series in terms of storytelling, And I kind of agree, even though I really like the story in SMT5, but I think the one in Nocturne or in 4/Apocalypse was better. Somebody said Dragon Quest XI, amazing story of course, undeniable. Alright, so now that we are portable, let's go back in time a little bit and start with the Game Boy/Game Boy Color. I'm not too well versed in those consoles, so I'm gonna have to stay with Final Fantasy Legend 2. Simply out of nostalgia, simply because it's the one that I put the more hours into it. And even though I never finished it, I got pretty far into it. And I remember it just left an impact on me because that was the very first RPG I played in my life. And that was the one that showed me that video games could have this level of storytelling. Even though, well, Final Fantasy Legend 2 is actually, in reality, Saga 2. It was the second Saga game, you know, the Saga games, Romancing Saga, Saga Frontier. Well, initially the first Saga games were Saga 1, 2, and 3, and this is the second one. They just renamed it as Final Fantasy Legend for advertisement purposes. Final Fantasy was popular overseas, so they thought Squaresoft said, oh, just rename it as Final Fantasy Legend for that simple reason. But it's actually Saga 2. So, yeah, what about you guys? Original Game Boy Color 2. Pokemon Crystal? Pokemon... I wasn't expecting that answer, a Pokemon game? Huh. You probably mean Lufia The Legend Returns. The Ruins of Lore is the Game Boy Advance title. You probably mean The Legend Returns, which is on the Game Boy Color. And I never finished that game, but I remember the storytelling was decent. Okay, so let's move on to the Game Boy Advance. Okay, Game Boy Advance, my pick is Fire Emblem The Blazing Blade. Sure, you might think I'm biased because it's my favorite RPG on the system. What I like about this game is how the story is told. How it's told through first the Lyn arc, and it just seems more interesting, charismatic than starting right off with Eliwood and jumping in straight into the dragon, the ancient evil dragons cliche. And I think it's, when it comes to the name itself, Fire Emblem, you know, I think it's one of the games that make more sense because Fire Emblem has always been about the dragons, and they were heavily advertised in such a way in the past. They were all about the dragons, the strategy RPGs with the dragons, you know, it was always about that. So this one, it nails it. I mean, it is specifically about the freaking dragons. And it has some plot twists and some tragedies in there, some adult situations, some level of writing that I really thought was like not very common for this particular era, where back then they were still exploiting a hell of a lot the power of friendship and the teenager saving the world, and not this title. And the maturity of it was one of the reasons why it became my favorite game on the Game Boy Advance. What about you guys? I know a lot of you are gonna pick Mother 3, but unfortunately it never came out of Japan. Golden Sun 1 and 2. Golden Sun 1 and 2 have slow stories. You need to start with the first Golden Sun and beat it before you move on to the second one, even though the second one, its events happen almost at the same time as the first one. I think the second one has a great story, but the first one is very traditional. People are saying Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced. I'd like to know why. I only put like 3 hours into that game, and I felt like the story was made for kids, like that was Final Fantasy Tactics for kids. I'm surprised no one's brought up Super Robot Tyson Original Generation 1 and 2. Those were pretty much my second picks for this video, for the Game Boy Advance. Man, those games have... I mean, when they want to, the level of writing is different. Tactics Ogre Advance, okay, that'll be Tactics Ogre The Knight of Lotus. That's a great honorable mention, that's a great story. Okay, moving on to the Nintendo DS. I think you already know what I'm gonna pick. I think the best story ever written for a Nintendo DS JRPG is Radiant Historia. Sure, it's my favorite game on the system, but the first time I played that game it was in there, and I always thought, once again, I've been saying this the entire video, I do take preference with games that focus a little bit more on the mature and adult side of things, and probably because most of these JRPGs I played them when I was an adult. I don't know, it's just when I played Radiant Historia for the first time, I think I was like on my late 20s, so yeah, of course I was gonna lean more towards a plot like that. The fact that you can just manipulate time and go back to make different decisions to avoid tragedies. On the tragedies themselves, I mean, it's important to watch these tragedies and how the writers had the nerve to write these tragedies, and because they make an impact on you, they leave an impression on you, and that's why they need to leave an impression on you so you can say, oh no, I need to go back in time and change this. I mean, imagine if you could do that in real life. If you could just have this machine or this mysterious book that can take you back in time to alter the events that you regret or certain tragedies, I don't know. And how it was handled in such a way, the storytelling, I mean, it's an amazing story. I think it's a masterpiece of a story. What about you guys? The Dragon Quest remakes on the DS. Sure, because I think the story was expanded in 4, 5, and 6. I remember playing the NES version of Dragon Quest 4 and then on the Nintendo DS version, and I saw more storytelling, more dialogue in the Nintendo DS version. So you might have a point there. Dragon Quest 4, 5, and 6. Valkyrie Profile Covenant of the Plume. That's an amazing story, man. And it was so dark. Playing pretty much not as a villain, but as one who is so obsessed with revenge, you know, against Lenneth, Valkyrie. I mean, that Covenant of the Plume, yeah. Strange Journey, anything Shin Megami Tensei, you know, Devil Survivor, of course. Devil Survivor 1 and 2, the level of writing, I mean, these are the same writers as the Grow Lancer series in the original Land Greaser games. Of course, their storytelling is on another level. The World Ends With You, I'm gonna have to disagree because I didn't like the type of story it was, or the dialogue, or the characters. And the last one, Sense of Destruction, great ideas. It isn't the best story, but that's a story written by Masato Kato. Sense of Destruction had a pretty good story too. Great honorable mention, great pick. Moving on to the Nintendo 3DS, well, because I didn't pick Devil Survivor on the DS, now I'm gonna have to pick it on the 3DS. But it's a port, and it's supposed to be a Nintendo DS game. So here's my dilemma, I'm gonna have to make a tie with Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse. I think it's a game that focused a little bit more on its story. 4 is also an amazing story, but I found Apocalypse to be more engaging. Sure, it included a bit more Persona-like tropes and characters and situations, but still, everything that happened with the organizations, with the demons and the angels, and all of their dialogue, all of their scenes, and the end, and especially everything related to Dagda and his plans to manipulate the main character for his own personal gain. I don't know, man, it was just Dagda. His dialogue, his personality, the things he says, how he reacts. I fucking love that, man. Yeah, sure, Shin Megami Tensei 4 and Apocalypse both should be together on the same spot, but I thought Apocalypse had a more engaging and interesting story, and it's a more story-focused game. That's what I'm trying to say. It hurts that I can't give the place to Devil Survivor because it belongs on a Nintendo DS, because also the story in there is mind-blowing, and the endings and the roots and the different situations, how these characters board these situations, I don't know. It's awesome, but I'm gonna have to stick with Apocalypse because it was a game, it was a story written for the Nintendo 3DS. What about you guys? Seven Dragon, BF, okay. I never finished that game, so I can't talk much about it, but okay. Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance was fantastic, okay. I'm not a fan of Kingdom Hearts, but if that's your pick. Alliance Alive, great story written by Murayama, the creator of Suikoden, so of course, that's a solid pick. Strange Journey counts because they added a whole new character and a whole new arc for this character that wasn't in the original, so I'll give you that. Come on, Project Cross On 1 and 2, I mean, I fucking love those games passionately, but come on, man, the stories are all over the place, they're so nonsensical, they're fan service games. So that's it for Nintendo consoles, everybody. We are now going to move on to PlayStation, and we're going to start with the PlayStation 1, and of course, it's undeniable that Xenogears is number 1. If you disagree, GTFO. Nah, I'm kidding. Xenogears, you thought I was gonna pick Chrono Cross, didn't you? Well, Chrono Cross will be my second pick. But I think the story in Xenogears is... no one can come even close. No one. I mean, I just don't understand how Tetsuya Takahashi and his wife, Soraya Saga, came up with that. And we could have gotten a much better story had Squaresoft not told them that they wanted a teen rating. Xenogears could have been much darker. Remember that. And then... man... Even with the budget reduced, even with the disc 2 that was rushed, even with all the problems, they still came up with this freaking mind-blowing story that's on a huge level. Most JRPGs don't come even close. And how do they manage that? You know, this character with his mental issues and religious themes, so very well handled. All these philosophical and psychological themes merge together with science fiction. And with all that's happening with Faye, his character, and Ellie, everything that Ellie goes through the game and went through in her past, I mean... and when it ends, when you finish the game, no spoilers, but when you finish the game, you're like, what the fuck did I just play, man? Was this really a Japanese role-playing game on the PlayStation 1 with a teen rating? Oh my god. What about you guys? Chrono Cross is my honorable mention, of course. Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII can be overrated as hell if you want to, but I agree, it's one hell of a story. Valkyrie Profile, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, it needed to be mentioned. Valkyrie Profile is probably the third best story, in my opinion. Vagrant Story, I never finished it, but yeah, I'll give you that. Kudelka had a great story, you know, an interesting plot, an interesting premise, interesting protagonist. Final Fantasy IX, by all means. Final Fantasy IX is more on the charming side of things, but it does have some events and some scenes and some dialogue that make you... I mean, you can really tell Sakaguchi took the story very seriously. Vandal Hearts, absolutely. Vandal Hearts is also another level. Probably my number 4 pick, you know, if I were to make a top 10. And the Suikoden games. How can we even leave behind or out the Suikoden games? Especially Suikoden 2, with that plot, with those plot twists, with that level of tragedy, with that level of writing. I mean, wow, Suikoden 2. Suikoden 2 needed to be mentioned. Thanks a bunch. Alright, we're gonna move to the PlayStation 2, and obviously my pick is Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria. Why that? Why Silmeria? Why did I pick Valkyrie Profile 2 on the PS2 and not the first one on the PS1? Because I think the second one focuses way more on the narrative between all characters together than separately. Remember, in the first Valkyrie Profile, every story was a different arc separately, while the story kept focusing little by little more and more on Lenneth. And on Silmeria, the entire story starts focusing on all characters from the beginning. And the plot twists, man! That's another game with mind-blowing plot twists. And I don't just mean the Lizard plot twist, that's all I'm gonna say, don't spoiler. I mean the other plot twist with the other character that I won't mention. When that happens, you're like, holy shit, man. And I think it's a game that had the balls to do tragedy on another level, to establish this tragedy and say, I don't give a shit. Players are gonna be feeling like shit, I don't care. And I admire that and I respect that. And how the story progression is... I'll admit Silmeria doesn't have the best story. A better story could be easily Grow Lancer, Heritage of War, and that was my original pick. But I may be biased and sticking to my the emotional side of things of Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria. I think it's a very emotional game, and it's a game that makes you connect with the main characters a lot and their situations and what they go through. I don't know, man. What about you guys? Persona 3, absolutely. Persona 3 revolutionized storytelling with simulation, so it needed to be mentioned, absolutely. The Xenosaga trilogy is an obvious, I agree. It needed to be here. I mean, it's on another level of writing. Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2, amazing stories, very unique stories, actually. Also, stories with balls, with a lot of balls. Arc the Lad 4. Twilight of the Spirits, that's a fantastic story. Grow Lancer 2, The Sense of Justice, yeah, great story. Grow Lancer, any Grow Lancer game, and all Grow Lancer games have this level of writing that it's just supreme. And finally, someone said the Dog Hack GU trilogy. I agree. That was also going to be my pick. Alright, moving on to the PlayStation 3, Nier. No doubt about it. No questions asked. Nier. Yoko Taro, Nier. The original Nier just out. With Daddy Nier. I mean... oh, holy shit, man. Do I even need to explain? Just go and play Replicant. If you can't get your hands on a PlayStation 3 or 360, play Replicant. It's the same story, it just changes a little bit because then the character is now an older brother instead of a dad. But I mean, it's more impactful as a dad, right? To me personally, I don't have any kids, but I don't know. I have a dad. I just felt a lot for this guy. It makes more sense to me. It's just more relatable to see a dad struggling to save his daughter than a brother struggling to save his sister. That's just how I see it personally. But yeah, I mean, Nier was a whole new level of darkness in storytelling without going overboard like Drakengard 3. I mean, Yoko Taro just went nuts with that story. But Nier, it was more deep, it was deeper, it was more carefully crafted. All to reach that plot twist at the end and shock the player, like tell you like, what? No, and when you play the game again for the second time, that happened to me. When I finished that game for the second time, it was the same impact. It was just as impactful as the first time. You know, that's the power of Nier. What about you guys? Thank you for mentioning Valkyria Chronicles. That's a fantastic story, man. I've been saying this the entire video, you know. Characters in adult situations, political situations, mature situations, you know, realistic situations instead of the teenagers saving the world. Valkyria Chronicles needed to be mentioned, thanks a bunch. Eternal Sonata, that's a fantastic story. Also a story that's more on the emotional side of things, just like Silmeria. Tales of Graces is one of those JRPGs with character progression. With real character progression. Did someone say Atelier Rorona? Come on. Anyway, yeah, sure, Tales of Exilia 1 and 2, I mean, the writing was different. It was different in those games, and they have a more impactful story than other Tales games. Let's leave it at that. Alright, everybody, let's move on to the PlayStation 4. And you're not gonna believe that my pick isn't any of the Trails games. It's mother freaking East 9. I keep saying, I said this when I did my review of the game. I actually finished it on the Switch, but East 9 completely surprised me, and you know me, I prefer darker themes and more fucked up stuff in there and more situations like that are not really seen as often in JRPG storytelling, and that's what East 9 came out to be as a surprise. The whole prison city thing and having two adults and not knowing which one is the real adult, and the whole Aprilis thing, her whole arc. And that ending, man, when you finally know what the hell is going on and why is Aprilis doing everything, when you finally understand why, and this is some shit that's been going there for years, decades, you know, and it hits you, man, it's like, man, oh my god, I felt for Aprilis, and I wish she could have been a playable character. It broke my heart that you can't play as Aprilis, like, what were they thinking? That's the one thing that kind of ruins the Aprilis arc for me, but still, in terms of storytelling, in terms of writing, you know, it just impressed me. So East 9 is my pick on the PS4, guys. I'm sorry. What about you guys? Okay, Persona 5, absolutely. Valkyria Chronicles 4, definitely every Valkyria Chronicles game. Yakuza Like a Dragon, absolutely, man. That came close to be my number one. That's a great pick, man. 13 Sentinels, one of the best stories written in a JRPG for the PlayStation 4. Tales of Berseria, I think it was a phenomenal follow-up to Zestiria, because Zestiria was kind of weak in terms of storytelling. So along came Berseria with this badass protagonist, with these dark themes. I don't have a PS5, so I don't have an opinion. I can only mention the same games that are on PS4 that are also on 5, like East 9, for example. Oh, someone's gonna say Final Fantasy 16. Tales of Arise on PS5, I know that. Scarlet Nexus, Scarlet Nexus, man. That's a great story. I'll pick Star Ocean: The Divine Force. Just because it has a great story and one of the best stories in the Star Ocean universe. And the Diofield Chronicle 2. PSP, I didn't pick Trails in the Sky. No. I was this close of choosing Trails in the Sky, but no, I'm gonna stick with Fate Extra. How can you top that? I know most of you haven't played that game or haven't even finished that game, but when you do, that's a David Lynch level of storytelling. Like, what the hell happened? When you beat Fate Extra, you're like, whoa, what? But in a good sense, like, it impresses you. Like, man, how did he come up with this? This is so weird, it's so bizarre, it's out of control. I can't talk much about it because of the spoilers, but really, guys, do yourself a favor and play Fate Extra. The storytelling in Day, it's like, what the hell? It's so freaking bizarre and confusing, and I love that. I mean, I wrote a book like that. It's called Nick's Inferno. Link in the description. Well, it's so hard to understand what's going on. When you finish Fate Extra, you kind of want to play it again just to see what the hell happened, man. I don't know, Fate Extra has such a unique way of storytelling. Like no other JRPG out there. It's gotta be my pick. What about you guys? Grow Lancer. You mean Grow Lancer 4? Okay, fantastic pick. Absolutely. Crisis Core, I never finished it, so I can't talk much about it. I mean, Trails in the Sky was already an honorable mention, so absolutely. Someone says Phantasy Star Portable 2. I prefer the first one. You know what ruined the second one for me? The main character, Emilia, I think. Oh my god, I can't stand that character. She ruined the game. I never finished it. I made it pretty far. I never finished it. Persona 2 Innocent Sin, great story, but that's a PlayStation game, a PlayStation 1 game. But nobody played it until the PSP version, which is the one that came out of Japan, so there you go. And Jeanne d'Arc, thank you for bringing it up. That's another, that was a close pick for me. Jeanne d'Arc. Alright, moving on to the PlayStation Vita. Well, I'm gonna have to go with East 8 now. Yeah. What I was saying earlier, that it just surprised me that I wasn't expecting that level of storytelling in an Ys game, and I certainly wasn't expecting adult Kristen to share the spotlight with another protagonist. That's never seen before. It's usually just Adol and his party members, or Adol by himself, and that's it. And in this 8th game, there was another main character, Dana, and you could play as her, and several missions with her, and I mean, the connection between both characters and what's going on in that island, it's so intriguing. And the things that happen during the island, some really emotional moments in there, some really tear-jerking moments, and some plot twists that you weren't expecting, like when everything finally comes, when everything is revealed at the end, you really, I mean, it just makes a lot of sense for some reason. Sometimes when they explain things to you at the end, there's a lot of plot holes, not in this game. I don't know, I just thought it was an amazingly written story. What about you guys? Muramasa the Demon Blade, that's a Wii game, and the story is great. I like the story, is very unique there. I agree, it's a good story. Mind Zero was an interesting story too, even though the game itself is not that great. I mean, Trails, of course. I mentioned Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2. I agree. And somebody said Freedom Wars. That's an amazing story too. God Eater Resurrection, yeah. God Eater 1 and 2 are there. Now I know a lot of you are gonna leave, but we have to do Sega. Master System has the same problem as the NES, so I randomly picked Phantasy Star, the first one, even though I don't like the game. I don't like that game. The Sega Genesis, I'm gonna pick Phantasy Star 4, baby. I mean, come on. The best things about this game are spoilers, so I'm not gonna mention them, but if you play that game, you know what I'm talking about. And when you get to the end of the game, you feel satisfied. You end the game and you're like, okay, this was a great story. It leaves you with something inside. This doesn't leave you empty. And that's just science fiction and fantasy combined at its best. What about you guys? Shining Force 2, of course. Shining in the Darkness? Well, yeah, maybe. I never finished it. Didn't like it. Crusader of Senti is, I don't know, man. I'm gonna have to use the same argument as I did with Super Mario RPG or Earthbound. Like, it's a story for kids. It's good though, but I mean, it's like Pokemon. I mean, come on. Well, yeah, I mean, if that's your pick, that's okay. But the Sega CD, my pick will be Lunar 2, but the second one, not the first one, because the second one I felt the story was more I don't want to say mature, but it was a little bit darker than the first one. Moving on to the Sega Saturn, I haven't finished a single RPG in there, and I barely played the very few ones that I've played. Dragon Force, which is a very influential game. It was a very influential in Japan. Nobody gave a damn about it outside of Japan, but in Japan it was big and it was very influential. I mean, even games like Suikoden take influence from Dragon Force. Dreamcast, my pick is Grandia 2. I like the main character. I like how there's this unusual main character who's pretty much an anti-hero. Later he becomes the hero, whatever, but for the most of our part of the game, he's a jackass. He's an asshole. Ryudo and his bird Psyche or Sky, I mean, they're assholes. And the first thing when you play this game, the first thing you see is these guys, this conversation between these guys, and you're like, what? I mean, these are unusual main characters, and I don't know. There's something about Ryudo that I like, and they gave him a perfect contrast. This crazy ass, kind of succubus-looking character called Millennia. And she's inside Elena's body, which is the exact opposite. So we got two completely opposite girls merged into one body. I thought that was great, man. Alright, so that's it for Sega. Well, I guess we should mention the Game Gear real quick. Shining Force, definitely. And we're gonna end this video with Xbox consoles. The original Xbox. No one cares. And you shouldn't care, so let's move on straight to the 360. The Xbox 360, Lost Odyssey. I mean, how can it not be Lost freaking Odyssey? That's a masterpiece of a game, that's an excellent video game. That's a game I wish was available for PlayStation consoles so more people could experience its masterful story. What I love the most about Lost Odyssey, and I know a lot of people criticized this back then, and they still do criticize it today, is the dreams. Sure, the dreams were kind of like a visual novel. You were just reading walls of text. But for some reason, most of those stories were either heartbreaking or dark as hell, and you learned more and more about the main character's misery, how he is an immortal, and he's just tired of being one, and he's gone through a lot of shit, man, as an immortal, you know, he's seen everything, you know, wow. And how it's told, it's so powerful, you know, you kind of feel like Hironobu Sakaguchi is trying to write the story of his own life, you know, in a sense. And I don't know, man, it hooked me up. The dreams, I got all of them. I watched every single one of them, and I do recommend doing that. Alright, what about you guys? Tales of Vesperia, that's a great story. Blue Dragon, I guess it's it's okay. It does have some interesting things about it. I wouldn't pick it, but okay, maybe why not? Infinite of Discovery, that's a Tri-Ace game, that definitely needed to be mentioned. And let's move on to the Xbox One. Well, I didn't pick Nier Automata on the PlayStation 4 or the Switch, so I'm choosing it now. Yakuza Like a Dragon on Xbox One and Xbox Series X. Let me pick Yakuza Like a Dragon on Xbox Series X, even though I didn't play it there. That's my pick. That's it, guys. That is it. That is the best story ever written in a JRPG for every single relevant console. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. And thank you for being a part of it. See you next time!